Welcome to the Yorkshire Leaders Podcast, where we get inspired by the stories, successes and failures of the local leaders of today, and importantly, we help to inspire the leaders of tomorrow. I'm Rachel Clark, a marketing director and lifelong learner who's on a mission to learn from the leaders across our region and to share their stories to help us inspire us all to take on new challenges and grow from them. Today's Yorkshire leader took on her latest role at law firm Ward Hadaway during the pandemic, when she couldn't actually meet her new colleagues face to face. She has an impressive background of over 20 years in commercial litigation and, according to her bio, is known for her meticulous preparation, effective negotiation skills and her robust pursuit or defence of claims in court. So I'd better be on my marks today. So listeners, please today say hello to Executive Partner at Ward Hadaway Leeds, Emma Digby. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So a little bit of background, Emma. We mentioned just now that you joined Ward Hadaway in the pandemic. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'd moved to Leeds after over 20 years practicing in Sheffield. In September 2019. I was waiting for my house to be built, so I was busy commuting, and I joined a firm in Leeds. Shortly after that, the firm was acquired by a PLC, which wasn't really for me in terms of where I wanted my career to go. And I knew the litigation partner and the CDR head nationally, and I contacted them and moved over to Ward Hadaway. Our negotiations were ongoing in March 2020, just as the world shut down. So it was a particularly difficult time, but one that certainly made me a lot stronger. And the move was definitely for the best.
Absolutely. And that's such a familiar story to many of us, isn't it? You know, crazy things happened in lockdown. Some people moved jobs, moving careers, all sorts was going on. What a time. And how did you kind of negotiate meeting everyone that you needed to meet within a new role?
I think Ward Hadaway changed significantly. I mean, obviously I wasn't around pre-pandemic, but they were very, very quick to maneuver online. So it was a case of getting to know my team very quickly through Teams, through group meetings, through national meetings. And I just had to accept I threw myself into it and get to know everybody and try and be yourself and try and be authentic. I think my biggest panic came actually when we were moving back to the office, and I had to confess to everybody I was actually only 5'2", because they all saw me fill this screen and be quite a wild card. So it was very difficult times, but I had an incredible team that were really, really supportive.
And so you moved up from Sheffield to Leeds, and how have you found that transition? Because obviously this podcast is all about Yorkshire, so we like to talk about everywhere within Yorkshire. Are there any sort of contrasts between the cities?
Absolutely. I mean, Sheffield's home for me. I've lived there since I was 2 years old. A long 16 years, Rachel. And I think it was although I enjoyed my time in Sheffield and I had a fantastic career there. I was at my first firm for 12 years. I then set up as a sole practitioner and sold out in 2015. I worked with some great people, but Sheffield started to slow down in terms of the legal markets. From my perspective, you know, we didn't have the quality of cases going through Sheffield courts anymore. There was certainly a big move towards Leeds. You know, I hit 40 and at that point was kind of wondering where my career was going to go. I'd sort of reached the top of where I was going to be in the firm that I was at. And I was spending more and more time in Leeds as we were issuing predominantly out of Leeds County and High Courts. And I think I just felt that there was a vibrancy to the city, certainly a great nightlife. And I just loved the business community in Leeds. It was very, very dynamic. And I decided that was the time for me to move.
I mean, as someone that's worked across, you know, different cities in Yorkshire, there's so many things going on in each different city and so many special things within each city. It's each got its own personality.
Absolutely.
So I think lots of us are working across those cities and enjoying the different vibes that's going on in each city. So it's good to hear from someone else how you've found it. And if you weren't doing what you're doing now, would you have had a plan B?
When I was younger, my plan B was to become a teacher. As I've got older, my passion became more around health and fitness, the child obesity crisis that we have going on at the moment. So I think if I didn't have to work for money and I had capital behind me, I'd probably set up camps for children who have confidence, you know, need some support with their confidence, perhaps suffer with eating disorders, those kind of problems that seem so rife in today's society.
Gosh, absolutely. That'd be an amazing thing to do as well, because it's an ongoing issue, isn't it? That
It is, yes.
we're all faced with, and in terms of the NHS as well. So, and Emma, I know your upbringing. I think your dad used to work in manufacturing.
That's right.
Can you tell us a
Director at
little bit
Stanley
about that?
Tools.
Yeah, Stanley
Yeah,
Tools.
that's how we ended up in Sheffield, unsurprisingly.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely, with the Stanley
so
knife.
Yeah, absolutely. Dad was a salesman by trade, and my father was a very good businessman, very shrewd guy, incredibly hardworking. And he made his way up the ladder and became a European director of Stanley Tools. So, as a child at 2, 3 years old, I remember moving to Sheffield from Torquay, away from a very large family down there. And I used to love going into the office with Dad. And I always remember there was 2 security guards at Stanley Tools at Woodside, Barry and Cyril.
Oh, brilliant
And
names.
whilst Dad was working, they used to take myself and my brother around the factory. I mean, you couldn't do it now with health and
Wow.
safety, but I can hear it, I can smell it, and it was that's where I got my passion for manufacturing. And when Dad retired in 2003, he was still a relatively young man, and set up an import business where we imported tooling and decorating products for years. In fact, he's still going, even though he's the wrong side of 75. So we are trying to get him to retire, but I think it's in his blood.
It sounds like he's not going to do that.
I know.
He's enjoying himself too much.
Don't tell that to my mum.
And Emma, with Ward Hadaway, I know that you do a lot of work with entrepreneurs and different enterprises around the region as well, and that you've got, is it a top 50 list of
Fastest 50, yes.
Fastest 50. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I just love to hear how people end up doing what they do. I think I'm just inherently a nosy person. And also an avid people watcher. But I think that there's so much diversity in Yorkshire in terms of our business owners. And the Fastest 50 was an initiative that Ward Hadaway ran prior to me coming in, but as executive partner, I kind of play a bit of an ambassadorial role and head that initiative up in terms of the public facing angles to it. And it celebrates the fastest growing companies. It's not sponsored in any way. It is run from accounts which are filed at Companies House. So it's completely impartial and it's fantastic. So it will be running again next year. I was told yesterday the date's been confirmed of the 8th of March. And we have a huge do. Around 200 people come. We celebrate business in the community. And my goodness, have we not had some challenges over the last few years? But
Absolutely.
we've really seen people succeed.
Well.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. And are there a couple of ones that spring to mind that you could talk about a little bit? The winners or the people that are involved in it?
Yeah, I mean, last year's winner was really an interesting story. They'd gone through a huge period of growth and they were a shed company. So during the pandemic, there were a lot of people who were relying on home bars and converting outside space to more leisurely use.
So like a garden shed company.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so they had ended up as our overall winners because of the growth period that they'd had during the pandemic. I was also aware of a door company down in Sheffield, and they diversified massively and they took very measured risks as a management board. So they acquired strategically, they held stock, they developed logistic chains so that they could supply into their competitors as well, which was really quite surprising. And the firm went through a management buyout and were incredibly successful because of the brave decisions that the management board had taken with strategic advisors, good finance advice, etc. It was just really interesting to see those who succeeded through those difficult times.
Yeah, and what a fascinating time to be running such an initiative as well.
Absolutely.
You really would see some ups and downs and lefts and right. So Emma, within Ward Hadaway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the leadership that you're doing now and about the role that you're doing. So you're executive partner.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how many is in the teams? Like how many is in each office? I know you've got different offices around the region.
Absolutely. So we're around 500 in Ward Hadaway nationally. Leeds is our second biggest office out of 3. I have two roles within the business. I look after the commercial litigation team alongside my colleague Ian McCombie, who's a real character. When I came in, there was 4 of us. We've just taken on our 11th member of our team, and commercial litigation in Leeds grew by just over 33% last year. So we had a phenomenal year, and I work with the most amazing team, the great people, and we have a lot of fun along the way, and it's quite a stressful job. So that's important that we have that support within the team. In terms of the exec partner role, I don't think anybody knew how that role was going to look when I came into it, but it's really taken a turn, and I have such a passion for the office and what we stand for. We have a very unique culture in Leeds in that we have the infrastructure of such a big firm behind us, but there's just over 90 of us in the office. And so we have that small firm agility and camaraderie. And so we have a lot of cross-unit referrals. We all work very closely together, and everybody who visits the office says what a great atmosphere we have and how well we all get on together. It sounds a bit glib, but it's true. We do have a lot of fun again along the way, which I think is really important in business. And, we've made some really good lateral hires. We've grown and developed our team. We invest very, very highly in our team, and it's great to see them develop and grow as well. And we saw a 24% increase in our turnover end of financial year 22. And this year, unaudited accounts are showing that we've got an increase in headcount of 16%. That brought its own challenges, moving to things like hot desking. Who knows where people store their shoes when they don't have a permanent desk? So we had to bring in lockers, and, it really changed the way that we work. And again, this year, we've seen over 33% growth in our turnover for the Leeds office. So I'm incredibly proud of what we're achieving there. And again, just great people.
I guess with the turnover, with that impressive amount of growth, especially at the moment, what do you attribute that to? Is it just the marketplace? Is it things?
I think as a firm, we have a great ethos. It very much centres around client service and our relationships. We look at the way that we acquire new clients, which of course is important to any business, but also how do we develop and retain our clients? And to do that, you have to offer something different. Everybody comes to a lawyer expecting them to know their stuff. So you have to go over and above that. So we're constantly developing our client experience, our IT offerings. How do we support our people? How do we develop them as individuals so that we're offering huge diversity in the marketplace against what is a very competitive market?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating to hear about, because it really is, as a client, if you're going to a law firm, it's quite a scary process. So like you say, if you've got happy people that are great at what they do, then those clients are going to stay.
Some people are going through good times. They may have achieved a sale of a business that they've been working towards, and they're going to be, reach financial security. But for that moment, it's quite a stressful time in their life. As a disputes lawyer, nobody really wants to come and see us. And at that, as I say to my team, although these are commercial people, because predominantly we act for business owners, at that moment in time, they are in a very vulnerable position, and we need to make sure that we support them through that. And that can look at different ways to different clients, but we must always remember that there are people behind the business. And it's amazing how many times people say, oh, well, but you work in a corporate world, you're dealing with businesses. Yeah, but people own them, and they mean an awful lot to those people.
And I think what's come across in the research that I've done about you, Emma, is that you really are humble, and that humility really, it does really kind of shine through when people come and meet someone when they are in that vulnerable position. That's going to win more business for the firm, as well as just be great to deal with in terms of person to person.
Thank you.
And so what sort of leader would you say you are?
I would like to say pretty agile, because I think everybody within the firm requires a different leadership style. We all communicate differently. We're all affected by our environment and what may be going on for us professionally and personally at the time. So you have to be attuned to that, and you have to understand that not everybody is receptive to your message at that time, and it's about supporting them through that, and it's about listening to what people want. Yes, we are a business. Yes, we have to thrive. We have KPIs to achieve. That's the same. We wouldn't be successful if we weren't mindful to that. But also, these are individuals who work for us. So it's not always about fulfilling the business need. It's about understanding how our people can develop and be happy themselves, and listening to that, and how that can adapt to create an even better working environment for them, because ultimately that will only make our services even better to our clients as well.
And I saw that from my very in-depth research on the website that Ward Hadaway does quite a lot in the community as well, which I was quite heartened to see.
That's right. It was always, prior to me joining, it was a firm that believed in its community activities. Sadly, during the pandemic, that really halted. We had a few projects ongoing, such as the Greg's Breakfast Club, which I think is incredibly important in terms of starting our kids out in the right way in the morning. We're still part of that initiative. I came from a background where I had the pleasure of working with the Sheffield Eagles. People question my motives about that, Rachel.
Now, tell us a bit about the Eagles, because I'm ignorant.
So the Eagles are a rugby league team in Sheffield.
Right,
and Sheffield, of course, is probably more of a football city as opposed to rugby league. So there's always some challenges, and it was run by a guy called Mark Aston, who's a real inspiration, very, very passionate about what he did. And I was introduced to them to come in and work with their community foundation. And when I met with Mark, he always talked about, give a kid a dream. And I, in my ivory tower, thought that was very much about scouting for future talent, those kids that needed to be seen and that they would become professional rugby players. And of course, as a club, that's what the Eagles would hope, that they could grow some organic talent. But actually, having been out to the schools, it's incredibly harrowing how these young people in our own cities can face some real challenges. And it became apparent to me that it was much more about, kids learning communication skills. How do you communicate with your peers when you become frustrated so that you're not using violence? A lot of the time people raise money and say, oh, we'll buy this school this huge climbing frame. Well, actually, these kids are doing PE in their jeans because they're lucky to have one set of clothes, never mind 2 sets of clean clothes. So a particular school, it might be more beneficial for them to have a washing machine so that kits can be prepared. Kids learn about communication, they learn about teamwork. For some kids, it was just having an hour where they weren't a carer or where they weren't being abused. And, when you walk into an inner city school and your fingerprints are electronically taken and you have to be DBS checked and the doors locked behind you, it is absolutely humbling. So for me, when I moved to Ward Hadaway and I knew that they had an ethos of working within the community, working with those who are more vulnerable, working for those who need a step up. And so we have lots of initiatives. We work with the Leeds Community Foundation, which is fantastic.
I absolutely love them.
Yes,
I've done quite a lot with LCF.
Absolutely.
And the team, and they just do the most amazing work across just such a spectrum of different charities, don't they? And it's just really, like you say, humbling.
Absolutely.
To go and experience some of them.
And I think working with someone like LCF, you have a far bigger reach, because we don't know how to properly vet charities and make sure that our money is going to where it needs to go in those occasions. So LCF offer such a fantastic support to corporates like ourselves. We have a charity of the year. This year we're supporting Martin House, which again, although it's so upsetting, and I don't think we've yet made it through a talk without me ending up in tears.
Yes, that's the only thing, isn't it? Everyone ends up in tears at some point.
Absolutely.
In a good way. Because it's,
the work that they do supporting the families and the children and the siblings is just phenomenal. So we have lots of different projects going on, lots of different ways. There's an awful rumor that we have a social on the 7th of September and that there are going to be stocks. And I anticipate as exec partner, I will end up being incredibly wet that evening.
That sounds quite intense.
If it raises money, I'm game.
Yeah, good for you. When do you feel like you've grown the most in life or your career? I know we talk a lot about failure on this podcast and people often grow from failure. Is there any time that you can think of where you've really grown?
I think there's 2 key points in my life. One was when I was doing my A-levels. Up until that point, I'd found academics really quite easy. So although I'd been a very diligent student and I'd worked hard, it had come very easily and I had always attained good grades, but I'd always been that annoying person who could still have a lot of fun and didn't need to be on my desk 24/7. When I hit A-levels, I'm a September birthday.
Oh,
so Yeah.
Yeah.
So back then it perhaps wasn't as strict in terms of ID. So at 17, I'd learned to drive, I'd discovered bars, perhaps had more interest in boys, and I was slightly
It sounds
distracted.
familiar.
And I found A levels really tough, in fact, much tougher than I did my law degree. And I missed one grade and thought life was over. I thought I wasn't going to get into university. I wasn't going to be able to study law. And I had to go through clearing, and unfortunately did get, because of a diverse CV, the place that I wanted to get. And it taught me that I had to work hard and that things in life weren't just delivered up. So
Yeah,
although it
handed
was
on a plate.
incredibly difficult time, I'm grateful for that experience, and I was determined that I was never going to be in that position again. And then I think pandemic changed me, because up until then I had been so dogmatic. I would hope that I was always professional and caring about those who worked with me and around me, but I was just driven. I was a litigator. I couldn't show any weakness. That was how I was. And then I got locked down into this new house away from my family. I remember my niece's birthday and being heartbroken that I wasn't going to see her. I got ill. My parents were saying, we're coming up. And I was like, you'll be arrested on the M1. You can't come and see me. It was just the most surreal experience. And I remember the new year as we were about to be locked down again. And I'd been down to see my parents New Year's Eve, and I drove back and I just had tears streaming, because I didn't know when I was going to see them again from a very close family. And I walked into this house and I just thought, this isn't for me. I don't want to live like this.
New Year as well. That's such a time to go through all those thoughts, isn't it?
And I think I was very lucky. Stephen Petrie, who heads up CDR and will be Ward Hadaway's managing partner, he's our successor next year. He knew me. And he's also very similar to me. He's an insolvency lawyer by trade. So he was used to this really social life where we're out networking all the time and seeing loads of people. And he knew that I just wasn't right. And he kept a close eye on me. And I said to him, I was like, I can't bear being in this house, and I'm looking at my screen and I'm not productive and I don't know what's going on. And I found it very hard to show that vulnerability, but I'm so much better for it. And I think I'm so much more of an authentic leader.
Absolutely. And it's kind of, until you've had to go there and be vulnerable, it's such an alien place to be, because you've kind of probably got where you are in terms of your leadership position because you haven't shown it. And
Absolutely.
then I think leaders who do show vulnerability it's so much easier to connect with them because of it. If people can see that you're also going through these things, you're also human, that's a lot easier to lead from than a space of I'm right all the time and I never go through anything bad. Emma, we talked about your 17, 18-year-old self. If you could give your 21-year-old self some advice, what would you tell her?
I think for me, I would have had more fun, because I have a reputation for being a party girl. Very unfounded, Rachel, I have to say.
You've made up for it.
But I went through school. I did my A levels. I went straight to university, and then you're in your career. And I don't have children. I've never had that career break. I've always been completely career focused, and I wish I'd have taken a year to develop me, to travel, to do different things,
to get lost a little bit.
Absolutely. Make some bad decisions in life,
but not too many.
Absolutely. And I think our next generations have changed, but I think at that time we were all very much, you had to get on the career ladder. And I think that sometimes there's so much more to life.
Yeah. And I guess for you mentioned your niece before, when you're looking at your nieces or your younger generations, you kind of think it'd be easy to tell them that advice, because you can kind of put yourself in their shoes and say, actually, have you thought about doing such and such, or just going off on one for a little while and doing it that way?
Absolutely.
Because it's a big wide world, isn't it? And I don't think there's any better education than travelling.
My guilty pleasure is a series called Below Deck. You've heard of it?
I've heard of it. I've seen a little bit of it.
I absolutely love it. And if I didn't get so seasick, That's what I would have done, is to go
Brilliant.
and work on a yacht in the Caribbean and meet some fantastic people.
And Emma, we've talked about humility, but what other values are quite important to you when you're leading and when it comes to the business?
Touched on it earlier. I think you have to be authentic. I think you have to be sensitive. You have to be emotionally aware. And I think you have to have good communication skills. I think there's a lot that goes into being a leader. I still find it strange that people call me that.
But that's what you are.
but I think the big thing for me is being authentic. Particularly in this profession, I used to think can't have a Yorkshire accent. I didn't go to Oxford. I was always surrounded back then in 99 when I started out in practice. I was surrounded by older men and I wanted to emulate them. And it didn't dawn on me until I was older that actually that lack of diversity in the profession was going to hold the profession that I love so dearly back, and that it needed people to come and challenge it. And it needed people who loved business as much as the law to start driving the legal profession forward.
And to have that different backgrounds and different diversity reflected across the spectrum is difficult. I've worked a lot in real estate, which used to be very, male dominated, but it's much more diverse now, and it's a much better place for it.
Absolutely.
Both from kind of working with other teams, but also just work with clients as well, because you get all sorts of clients and you should have all sorts of people reflected back at them as well.
Absolutely. 100%.
And if you just had one message to leave our listeners with today, what would you leave them with? What would you say on a billboard?
Be brave. Make brave decisions and just go for it. Someone once said to me, ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And I love that.
That's a good one. My old boss used to say that's exactly that as well. And it's such a great tool to live by.
Absolutely.
Be courageous. And where can we find out more about Ward Hadaway?
We have a lot of social media activity, particularly in our LinkedIn pages. So any listeners can follow me. I'm usually sharing a lot of stuff. Ward Hadaway has a very interesting page. We have a lot of webinars that go out, which we deliver for free. We have lots of events. So the more the merrier. We just love to meet people.
Fantastic. Emma, thank you so much for your time today. That's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, and really interesting to chat as well about your story.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.